weeks after this show started off quite cleverly with a smash, how you feel now that Bruce has literally jetted away from the show and it's now starting to become more of what it's actually going to be in the long term. It's going to be maybe a little jarring for some of you. I watched the first 4 episodes back to back, so I very quickly became aware of what the show is going to be, whereas you have had a week to fall in love with it maybe being a little bit more Avengery. But in fact, She-Hulk does not care for the Avengers, as she makes quite clear this episode. I think she has some good points. But yes, in this episode, Jen gets her superhero name. As Bruce warned her, you don't get to choose. And a new fancy job, which is the setup for this actual series. This is really what the series is going to be like. Superhuman lawyer taking on superhuman cases. And it's interesting. Once again, I see really fascinating underlying elements going on here that the show does not have time to explore properly. And if it did, I feel it would be so much better for it. For instance, and this only occurred to me when I was going through to do my notes, Jen seems to have a lot of contempt for everyone, which I don't love. Career-oriented women are often accused of having a bad attitude, and so I don't love seeing it on Jen. But maybe she has contempt for everyone because she has contempt for herself. Maybe she doesn't like herself. And everyone preferring She-Hulk certainly doesn't help her own self-esteem, which has already been damaged. Also, maybe, I love this, maybe Jen Walters wants to believe Emil Blonsky can lead a normal life despite being the Abomination because she too wants to lead a normal life despite being She-Hulk. If she can help Blonsky leave Abomination behind, maybe there's hope for her too. Isn't that great? And I'm sure the writers and some defenders of this show might be like, well, yeah, it's great and it's in the show. And I'm like, is it? Is it really in the show? I think it's hidden deep in the code of the show, but I think that if they had a little more time each episode, I think they could honestly explore these things, and it not only would make the show more engaging and more interesting, but I think it would make Jen easier to understand and to sympathize with. I think it's great. I mean, those elements, and I wish the script and the show reflected them more. But let's start with the Easter eggs. Nom, 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 nom. All right, so, and there's a treasure trove as Jen, depressed, looks for a quirky job when it seems that no law firm will hire her. So we have this great web page. First, we've got the heading. By the way, this stuff is all put in post. And so I'm glad, I think they were like, we need more Easter eggs in this episode. And I'm glad they didn't waste the opportunity. So there's headings at the top, which means that website feels those are the most popular subjects. So find Ant-Man, which is like, where's Waldo? I think that's brilliant. I love that. Norse mythology is a popular subject because, of course, New Asgard is now a popular tourist destination, and you want to be prepared to go. Avengers, self-explanatory is why that's a popular category. I love that it would be on like celebrity sites though, right? What's up next what's the latest with the Avengers? Iron Man 3s, which I guess are like Jordans, and I don't really see a match there between Tony Stark and Michael Jordan. I think they could have done a better job and like what merchandise would maybe be. Then an Eternals reference, which is hilarious because a lot of you have been asking, why is no one talking about the aftermath of Eternals, considering it should be unmissable? I mean, you should be able to see that shit from space, man. And then, best for last, baby. I can't believe that this is this kind of reference because it's so hidden here. Talk about a buried Easter egg. It's Wolverine. I mean, it's subtle but undeniable. Man fights with metal claws in bar brawl. Wow, that's so great. And that's a really big deal for, obviously because it's Wolverine, but for 2 other reasons. On the heels of the Ms. Marvel reveal, with her being a mutant, and also Professor Xavier, a different variation showing up in Multiverse of Madness, mutants are coming up fast. So that's exciting. And 2, they're in this universe. I mean, we were wondering if maybe they would be from another universe because they've opened up the multiverse. But clearly they're already here and amongst us and far enough along that Logan has the adamantium. So where have they been? Why are they underground? Why are they only a small little headline on a website? It's fascinating. It's very, very interesting. But, that has to, Kevin Feige, it's all intentional. He wouldn't allow them to put something like that in, especially like that. Or maybe he would. As I said, the MCU today is sloppy and silly, But I mean, it's very interesting and exciting. And as one would expect, although some of you, I think, probably would wish it would be somebody else, but I think it's becoming clearer and clearer, along with chatter from like Taron Egerton saying he's been talking to the MCU about Wolverine, that Wolverine will be one of, if not the first mutant to actually show up. I mean, he's a superstar. Of course, I think that makes sense. Just the claws. Oh, I'm excited. But wow, and what a place to bury it. That's nuts. But again, still very exciting. Also, Titania puts the super in super influencer, so she's a super powered influencer who I can't believe didn't show up this episode. Not only did she get really poorly treated at the end of the last episode, but now she's just courtroom sketches? That was incredible. They don't even have a picture of her being led out of the courtroom? What kind of crap news sites are these? And then there's Ally McBeal on the TV at the bar. Now, I brought this up not only because a lot of people felt this show owed something to Ally McBeal, but because Jessica Gao once again stuck her foot in her mouth in an interview, because she was like, oh yeah, we added Ally McBeal to the bar TV in post. So what they do is anytime there's like a TV screen or a computer screen or anything, they put green in there. And I see this often when I get screeners that aren't complete. And then they'll add those things in post. So it's really funny. The craziest I ever got was Ted Lasso when they were like, we'll add the crowd at the stadium later, because it was all green screen. Like things you wouldn't even think were green screened were green screened. But anyway, they'll never have a TV actually running or a computer actually running when they're filming. It always has a green screen there, and they put it in post. So she said, we decided to put in Ally McBeal because nobody who works on this show apparently is familiar with Ally McBeal, but they thought they'd throw a bone to the fans who'd brought that up when they were in post. Stop bringing this stuff up. How do you make a show about a female lawyer and, I don't know, research the famous popular shows about female lawyers that came before it? Right? I mean, why isn't Callista Flockhart a guest star on this show? I mean, the stuff writes itself. All right. Then next up, Bruce, who I have to say is really the nicest, most patient man. She won't leave. She's talking over him, although I think a lot of us have been there too. You know, she's excited, she's exuberant, but he's just so nice. I mean, that kumbaya stuff must really work. Although maybe he's too patient, because I don't think he should have forgiven Blonsky. I don't care how good that haiku was, and I can't believe that it's any good. But I don't trust Blonsky. More on that later in this video. But yes, Bruce is heading back to Sakaar in what seems like the very same ship that caused the car crash. Different paint job than the ship that was in Thor Ragnarok. So I think it's the same one. And so I guess they rendezvoused after all. It's like, wow, you caused a lot of problems. You know, you turned my cousin into a Hulk. What's your insurance information? That's right. They didn't get any insurance information. That ship caused a crash. All right. So maybe that's why he's heading back to Sakaar. That would be great. He's like, oh, we got to settle this up. You should talk to Jennifer about it. I think as a lawyer, she'd have some things that she should have some demands. So anyway, he's going back as Smart Hulk, though, and this is a place where his psyche was still divided, and he was Savage Hulk only until Thor showed up and brought Bruce back out. Now again, good money is on Bruce finding out that, well, his alter ego actually fathered a son in space, just like in the comics. And in the comics, the son was named Skaar, who aged up quickly into an adult. You know who else is aging up very quickly? Wiccan! Yes, there's a theory going around, which has piqued my interest, and that's the MCU could make Hulk's son Hulkling. Now, in the comics, Hulkling isn't at all related to the Hulk. He's in fact half Kree and half Skrull, a mix of those two alien races who have been so long at war. And he's eventually actually brought them together, kind of. I'm sure it won't last. But anyway, he's royalty. He's the son of Mar-Vell, who actually is Annette Bening in the MCU, but the son of Mar-Vell, who helped create Carol Danvers in the comics, who's Kree, and a Skrull princess, which again, as I said, makes Hulkling royalty. He's a lost prince hiding out on Earth because he's a child of a Romeo and Juliet type situation. And he just happens to be a really big fan of Hulk, which is why he called himself Hulkling. He has, again, nothing to do with gamma radiation. Now, because of his connection to the Kree and the Skrull, a lot of us, understandably, have been thinking he would show up in the upcoming Secret Invasion show. But he has such a complicated backstory for mainstream non-comic book fans. And why is he called Hulkling if he has actually nothing to do with the Hulk? Feige, who likes to streamline things, I agree with many of you that he could maybe make Hulkling actually Hulk's son, which would eventually make Bruce, Wanda, and Vision in-laws. What? They grows up so fast. As I said, a lot of Avengers are getting kids, with more to get kids very soon. In fact, I believe someone will be getting a child later this very year. That's all I'm going to say. All right, so anyway, we'll see what happens, but definitely watch this space. It's such a quick moment on the show, but it's so incredibly important for Hulk in the MCU. And also, who is the mother of Hulk's child? In the comics, it was an alien warrior named Skaar who had first helped imprison Hulk, but then when he led a rebellion against the planet that they were on, that evil king who Skaar worked for, she switched sides and helped up Hulk, and they fell in love. It had seemed in Ragnarok that Valkyrie kind of took the place of Skaar because they have kind of a similar look. But of course, Valkyrie and Hulk were friends and sparring partners, but there was no spark of romance there. And he was on that planet for 2 years, so I think it's very believable that he met someone else and hooked up with them or had a meaningful relationship. I mean, let's see if the MCU even bothers to explain this. The MCU is a little sloppy and a little silly these days. Who wants to have the adjectives that describe them be sloppy and silly? But anyway, they might be like, we don't need to explain it. Surprise, you're a dad. I mean, that's kind of like a trope. It's kind of a dated trope in Hollywood, but very often it's like, surprise, you're a child, you're a parent, here's the child, let's go. And I could see them potentially doing that here. But I would kind of like to know who the mother is. I think that kind of be nice. Thank you. Skaar is like a really important part of the Hulk legacy and mythology in the comics. All right, so again, we'll see. Let's see who this child is and if there are shades of Hulkling. So look for things that are like Hulkling, like the royal background. Maybe Hulk hooked up with a princess on Sakaar. Maybe a princess on the run. Maybe still Skrull or Kree, but now just mixed with the Hulk. So let's see. I mean, I think it's going to be Skaar in some form. All right, so finally, when it comes to Easter eggs, it looks like the Department of Damage Control, or the DODC, which I actually love, is rapidly expanding. From putting Adrian Toomes out of business, to interrogating Peter Parker, to trying to find out who Ms. Marvel's, what her secret identity is, it seems they've now upgraded to handling superhuman prisons. I love this. I love this kind of world building. That design, by the way, right out of the comic. Although in the comic, it was a PIM prison, and there was a mini prison outbreak, which is so great. I love the visual of She-Hulk looking in at the prisoners like it was a dollhouse. But I guess that was too expensive for Disney Plus, so they didn't do that. A lot of Marvel characters, by the way, have tried their hand at building prisons. Reed Richards also built a prison in the Negative Zone during Civil War. Now, speaking of prisons, back to the MCU, is the Raft still operational? That, of course, was run by Secretary of State Thunderbolt Ross. And at the end of Falcon and Winter Soldier, the Dora Milaje said they were taking Zemo to the Raft. I have to say, what's wrong with Emil Blonsky that Val doesn't want him? I don't know, maybe she has approached him. Maybe this is all part of the plan. But I'm like, hey, everyone's getting the nod from Val. I guess you're not going to Thunderbolts, buddy? It's funny. Tim Roth has said he even acknowledges he's playing like a totally different character than he originally did. He's like, I'm treating it like a whole new character. But I think there's something going on here, but it's interesting. His story, Emil Blonsky's sob story, reminded me an awful lot of U.S. agents. It was pretty much the same one. I was a decorated soldier who was supposed to be a hero and felt that the government was going to give me carte blanche to do whatever I wanted because I was kind of sketchy, which was why I got the job in the first place. But then I made mistakes in public and I got sold up the river. Cry me a river. That's a tale as old as time. But I do think Emil Blonsky on the surface has a solid enough case that I think a lawyer like Jen Walters could maybe have success here. And we'll discuss this case more in a moment. But first, I want to talk about superhero lawyers. First, if the DODC is locking up superheroes and supervillains, it makes total sense that there would be lawyers who specialize in these cases. And GLK&H is very smart to get in on the ground floor, a division that pays for itself, as they show here, with all the free publicity that it generates, especially with She-Hulk as the face of this new division. Speaking of publicity, it's the superhero division, even though they clearly represent supervillains as well. So nice branding. Now, there seems to be some commentary here on Jen being upset about being a diversity hire, but I don't really know if that's an accurate depiction of what's going on here. Again, I feel like these are more complex situations than the simple label that the show's trying to slap on them. Like, I would argue that people would expect any division that specializes in a certain type of person or people to be headed up by someone who is from that same group. Like if they didn't hire a superhero to run up the superhero law division, would they get criticized for that? And so it's made to seem like this is a men versus women situation, right? But I really, so there's the diversity hire situation, and then I think there's a layer on top of that of men versus women at work. But in that instance, I'm like, I really feel this is more about private corporate law versus working as a public defender. A common mistake that a lot of people make, even in real life, and that Jen is making herself here, is that you have to be able to speak a place's language if you want to survive and thrive there. You can't expect it to immediately conform to you because you're the one single new element and everything else there has been operating and moving along very smoothly. So you want to go with the flow before you try and disrupt it. And really, for all Jen's morals and talk about the high ground, so far on this show, she caves every single time that it benefits her. She caves immediately. Like if she hates GLK&H so much, why take a job there? Now, I know she couldn't get a job anywhere else, but listen to this. Why didn't she start her own practice? She could have easily started her own practice. I mean, I know it would make her too similar to Matt Murdock, but so that's why the show wouldn't have her do that. And I think it's great. I love her setup, but she doesn't have to be so negative about it because she ran headfirst into this situation. And I wish the show would at least explore her hypocrisy. All right. Also, though, that is an amazing office. I love that office. And it's a corner office. Move over, Avengers Tower. GLK&H Tower is also pretty sweet. And I did think that Jen's comments about the Avengers were fair. Like they didn't offer health care, maternity leave, a pension, or even a salary. I mean, Hawkeye has suffered because of that. He's not a billionaire. And that's why being an Avenger is largely for billionaires, she points out. I mean, she made a joke of it, but it made me think of how in the real world, the space race and space has largely suddenly become something for billionaires, which is ridiculous. But I can see, like in real life, instead of going into space, if it was an option, instead these people becoming superheroes like Tony Stark. Now, I love Paul, who also works in the superhero law division and gives her an awesome welcome basket, complete with a map to the best bathroom to poop in. I thought that was so cute. And it seemed to be I would love to have seen that. I would love that map to have been part of the end credits. I was like, let's zoom in on that. Also, the research room filled with comics, as I pointed out in my trailer reactions, that's also right from the She-Hulk comic. And I hope she actually does some research for on the show in that room. Also from the comic, Jen getting drunk when she changes back to her human form from She-Hulk because her metabolism so quickly and dramatically changes. Right out of the comic, although there she barfed. And, right on her new boss's shoes. Although in this case, she was getting fired in this scene. But the gag still would have worked in my opinion. Anyway, speaking of being fired, in the comic, she was also fired because being She-Hulk was deemed a liability. Also, she was fired in the comic for partying too hard. The evidence, I thought this was a great bit that I kind of wish they'd used here. She crushed a copier Xeroxing her butt at an office party. And she's like, how do you know it was me? And they're like, Jen, it was a color copier. Green butt, hilarious. I absolutely love it, so funny. But in the comic, it started out with She-Hulk being She-Hulk too much, like all the time, and partying too hard. And they set it up in that she was so upset about being such an introvert in school with her grades, and she felt she wasn't really living her life, that she started to make up for lost time. And I feel like maybe the show will eventually go there. I think from some of the things we've seen in the trailer, that maybe that is where they're headed. I mean, we still have, this is a 9-episode show, but, it was done in a little slightly different order in the comic. But I liked that element, and I do hope we see it here. Then one thing that I did think was done very well at The Office was, the way this was, I think in terms of like representation and talking about difficult things that women go through, I thought the moment that Holloway asked her to transform into She-Hulk right in front of him, not even allowing her to go to the ladies' room and take a moment, I thought that was very telling. I thought that was excellent. I mean, she was changing back and forth at the bar, and this is important. This is a conversation that can apply to so many things. At the bar, that was her choice to change back and forth in front of people, and it was a more relaxed, non-work environment. And again, the most important thing is it was her decision to do that. Here, she's asked, it's a command. It's literally a command. And it's almost, I think because it deals so much with appearance, and I think because She-Hulk is such a sexier version than Jen Walters, that you have a male superior wanting to see that version of you over like the real version, That's really problematic. And I thought that, I wish that the show had even maybe dived into it a little bit more. I thought that was really, really well done. And it showed that women have to deal with their appearance being paid so much more attention to in work environments, to the point that it becomes objectification. So I love that. I thought that I didn't like the other stuff there, the points they were trying to make at The Office, but I thought that Office point was excellent. Also, one of my favorite lines of the episode was from Holden Holloway later on, when he tells his assistant to tell Bob Thompson he's going to Minneapolis because he hates the cold. And he's like, no, tell him that. It's a spike transfer. I thought that was hilarious. And so her very first case is representing Emil Blonsky, who I must say is definitely not as innocent as he pretends to be. And I think he's clearly baiting Jen with the direction that he wants this case to go in. I mean, he acts like they're just having a casual conversation, but he's definitely putting out breadcrumbs. I loved her legalese, though. I love, even though the writers of this show said they couldn't write lawyers, I love when Jen suddenly becomes very lawyery. Because, it's different. It's a different flavor in the MCU. Like, and by the way, Legalese is the name of the bar they hang out at, which I think is great. Legalese means, little like overly legal, like the kind of language you see in contracts and stuff like that. So Jen wants to know. She says, does that mean you can't turn into the Abomination anymore, or you won't? And then Emil Blonsky went up to her and says, I choose not to. And so I thought that, he knows what he's doing. I'm also curious, well, I know, we'll discuss it when it happens, but quite the interesting tidbit about him finding 7 soulmates through the prison pen pal program who have purchased a large plot of land for him. The plot thickens. And of course, it gets leaked at the very end of the episode that he has been escaping prison for the illegal fight club that we saw in Shang-Chi, which I thought was very funny. But I do think that even with all that, from a legal standpoint, there is a solid case here. He didn't choose to become the Abomination. Certainly didn't know what he was signing up for. He was turned into that by the government, and before was highly decorated. His sketchiness being secret, but I mean, let's not pretend that wasn't why he got the gig. But I think that could be argued that it makes Blonsky a victim as well, who, having served quite a bit of time at this point, maybe should go free if he has indeed been rehabilitated. But I don't know how they could ever rely on him remaining rehabilitated. I will, let's see what happens. I think it's incredible. All right, so anyway, I'm curious to see where the show is going with this, but I do think that Jen's Silence of the Lambs joke might have been even more appropriate than she thought. All right, now what did I really not care for in the episode? Well, again, I really didn't like the heavy-handedness with negativity towards men, especially because there wasn't enough positivity towards men to balance it out. And it's like last week, a lot of you were like, I don't see what you were talking about, Grace. Well, you're getting a little bit more now, and you're going to get even more in the next 2 episodes. So this was just a little tidbit compared to what's coming. Like Dennis, I think, is an awful character. And he's meant to be an awful character, but I think he's an unrealistic awful character. For instance, in the bar, he says, there's a hot chick over there. I'm going to go talk to it. That is such a gross character. I'm sure someone here might be like, I've seen that. I think that even the most misogynistic, chauvinistic man would not call a woman it, especially in front of other women that he worked with. I mean, he's not insane. He has not been fired from the district attorney's office. And that's also something to think about. He's not even a corporate lawyer. He works in the district attorney's office, where there are a number of people who would be very sensitive to that kind of behavior. So how is he working there? I just thought the it was a step too far. I did think the nepotism joke that he said was funny about how she got her powers. I thought that was funny. And I thought making the family idiot also a guy on a show like this, which is so female-centric, I thought it was a low blow. I thought it was low-hanging fruit. Again, I thought it was sloppy. It was so easy, such an easy, unfair hit that you were kind of you're like, again, really? Like in every scene, it's the guy who's the problem? Although I thought the whole family scene was sloppy. Because while I love seeing Larry from Perfect Strangers, how is Jen's family so normal, considering, as many people pointed out last week talking about the trauma that Bruce has been through, he was abused by his father. His mother was abused by his father. And that abusive childhood is what helped create the mental issues that led to a separate Hulk identity when he was exposed to gamma radiation. So if Bruce's family was such a mess, how is this extended part of his family seemed totally fine? Like they were totally untouched by that disaster. And when they even talk about Bruce, they act like everything's fine. That didn't make any sense to me. Also, the Hawkeye joke about what does he do with his arrows, that was not only done by SNL, but cleverly answered by Hawkeye's own show. Really, does nobody in the MCU watch each other's material? Like, how did that get past editing? I'd be like, not only has that joke been done, but we answered it? Why are we still making it? And then also the joke about improving one's public image, also done in Hawkeye, with Kate Bishop's comments to Clint. And no mother would give a stranger, especially her daughters, private phone number to a strange man that she didn't know very well. I mean, maybe email, maybe a corporate phone number, or maybe just say, maybe my daughter will come in and give you some tips. I mean, I just couldn't believe that. And especially on a show, which again, where Jen just talked about how she could so easily be murdered if she made the wrong move, like literally murdered. And then her mother's like, I just dispensed your phone number all over downtown. And what a missed opportunity, by the way, not to make whoever she was talking to at the coffee shop, I believe, an Easter egg for another Marvel character. Yusuf, the only Yusuf in Marvel is Kamala Khan's father. So that was not great. And then the end credits scene, which also featured her family, I didn't love either because I didn't think it was funny. And again, I didn't like Jen being in a bad mood. I thought, she's always bad. She's always upset. She's always like kind of like grumpy. And again, I don't like that depiction of career-oriented women because I think it's an unfair characterization. And yet this show's leaning into it. What the heck? I did like her carrying the water jugs though. I thought that was very She-Hulk. I thought she looked great. So, and I like that she wears, she wears workout She-Hulk clothes that I think a woman would pick, which I think is also very cool. So that's my breakdown of She-Hulk Episode 2. Be sure to share your own thoughts about the episode and the direction you think the show is headed down below. Subscribe today. And of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.